We want to go back to that electoral college map because more states are being called now. So let's go ahead and show that, put that on the screen. The count there on the left-hand side there, Donald Trump with 195 electoral college votes. Kamala Harris now with 113. The number to get to win the presidency is 270. So you can see the states that have now been called on the map. We are still waiting for those critical swing states on the East Coast to be called.
Yeah. And Catherine, again, Texas is what put Trump up the biggest since last we looked at this map, but also we see Wyoming, the Dakotas, and then Nebraska is kind of a strange breakdown there.
Well, yeah, this might be a good time to talk about
Note
Maine
that
and
for our
Nebraska.
viewers so they understand what's going on with that.
Well, 48 of the 50 states are winner-take-all for the Electoral College. Whichever candidate wins the popular vote in that state wins all of the state's Electoral College votes. Maine and Nebraska are the exceptions. 2 of their electoral votes go to the winner of the statewide election, and then the other votes go to the winner of the congressional district. And the congressional district around Omaha is competitive. And so that's why often you have a scenario where Nebraska gives 1 electoral college vote to the Democrat and the remainder to the Republican candidate.
I know it sounded a little bit like a broken record, but no big surprises there.
No big surprises so far. Looking at that map, no big surprises. I think, you know, maybe the magnitude of victories is something to watch, but no big surprises in terms of the results.
Okay.
All right.
Let's take a look at some of the swing states, and then maybe we can talk about just the difficulty of getting results in quickly and why those states may not be called for a while. We're going to start with Minnesota, which is not considered a swing state, but we want to look at the numbers that we're getting in so far. We can't tell you what precincts have reported, but we do have Donald Trump up with 67% of the vote, Kamala Harris 31% of the vote. Just a small percentage of the vote has been counted so far. The polls just closed 13 minutes ago.
And to our neighbors to the east, Wisconsin, also with 10 electoral votes. Right now, Donald Trump up 62% to 36%. But again, these are very rough numbers, very early numbers. Keep that in mind.
Michigan, a true swing state, 15 electoral college votes. Biden did take this state at one point, and Michigan right now is too close to call, but the number of 10% of the votes have been counted. Kamala Harris ahead, 53% of the vote. Donald Trump, 45% of the vote.
The significance of this next swing state cannot be overstated. 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. This is the one that everybody's talking about. 19% of the votes counted so far. This becomes really important in Pennsylvania when cities like Philadelphia and other cities start to report in. So again, very early numbers.
Okay, let's take a look at North Carolina now. 16 electoral votes, and only 29% of the votes have been counted. They had, they have traditionally tried to vote pretty quick or get their vote counted pretty quickly. Right now, Donald Trump leading with 52% of the vote, Kamala Harris with 47% of the vote. You know, we'll wait and see if the numbers are coming from the metropolitan areas or the rural areas in that state.
Take a look at Georgia, neighboring Georgia there. 16 electoral votes in Georgia. This one is moving toward Donald Trump with 68% of the votes estimated to have been tabulated at this point. Right now, he has a 6-point lead in the state of Georgia.
All right, in Arizona, where the polls have not closed yet, 11 electoral votes. And they do, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine, they accept absentee ballots that are postmarked by Election Day. Is that right?
Right. Okay. Right. So Arizona is a state that Arizona, Nevada, we can expect the counting to go on for a while.
So it could be very slow. And it was so close in 2020, 10,000 votes separated the 2 candidates.
Let's, well, as long as you mentioned Nevada, let's take a look at Nevada right now. 6 electoral votes, but still, it's considered a swing state, even with the low number of electoral votes. Why is that? It's 6. It's 6. You'd think that they could make that up somewhere else, but it becomes so important when you deal with Wisconsin and Minnesota with their 10s, so you need to grab something out there.
Right, absolutely. So depending on how the other swing states shape up, if they're very, competitive and evenly divided, 6 electoral college votes can make the difference. And Nevada, just like all of these states, is pretty evenly divided in terms of its partisan identification. Nearly equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats.
And Florida has been leaning red for the last few presidential cycles. Those 30 electoral votes were called for Donald Trump maybe about 45 minutes to an hour ago.
And quickly, Texas taking Donald Trump, projected winner there with a 10% lead, 57% voted, reported in, but they do think that those key areas have reported in. So Donald Trump, the projected winner in the state of Texas. Let's take a look at the map in general, the bigger picture of all of this right now. And as you can see, It is filling in. Make sure you differentiate between the gray and the blue. Sometimes if you're just glancing, it's hard to see that. But the blue, the real blue, is the Democrat take, which is Kamala Harris. Obviously the red, but the rest, the grays, have been, those are untabulated at this point. So keep in mind as you're looking at this map that that's how that shakes down.
And then we do have another election alert to tell you about the U.S. Senate race in Minnesota. Amy Klobuchar, the longtime senator, she has won. Those numbers are not updated, but the race has been called for Amy Klobuchar. In the past a few election cycles, she has won by 60-some% of the vote. We'll get those numbers updated, but the race has been called in her favor.
Yes, ignore that right there. Just take her word for it.
Right. The graphic did not update. Okay, let's talk about some of the results and maybe even bring in 2020, because these swing states, not a one of them has been called yet, and they were so close in 2020, and it took days.
It took days. We did not know that Biden won until the Saturday after the Tuesday election 4 years ago. And so it is entirely possible that we could have a similar scenario this year. It sort of depends on the states. So Pennsylvania does not start counting its mail-in and absentee ballots until Election Day. And then on top of that, each county has slightly different election rules. And so we could see just the counting process to take a very long time, and then add to that a state that is so very close, they may count every ballot before it's called.
So this race has been called razor thin now for about 2 months. That's been the mantra. Have you seen anything in the margin of victory in the states that have been called so far that would indicate anything other than that?
The Florida margin is big. The result is not surprising, but the margin is big. Now, obviously, Harris did not really campaign in Florida because it's not a swing state. But that is interesting, and it does make me wonder about Georgia and North Carolina. But it's, those are two much more competitive states.
I think we're going to bring Florida up just to remind people of where we sit with that 30 electoral votes. That's a big number if you're grabbing electoral votes. That's why it is important. But as Catherine notes, it really wasn't considered a swing state.
Nope.
They expected it to go to Donald Trump, but the margin is notable at 13%.
Yeah. Exit polling. Have you been able to get any information about exit polling today? Just the demographics, who's out voting, what they were saying at the polls today?
Not in terms of the actual exit polls. I mean, some, places in Pennsylvania were reporting very long lines, for example, especially on some college campuses. But again, it's sort of all anecdotal pieces here and there, and we don't have that systematic evidence from the full set of exit polls.
All right, it's about 20 minutes after 8. Minnesota and Wisconsin, we are getting some numbers trickling in. Let's bring up Minnesota first, our home state here. Donald Trump with 67% of the vote to Kamala Harris's 31%. Very early numbers. In fact, Kamala Harris hasn't even broke 1,000 tabulated yet, so we know these are very, very early.
And we want to take a look at Wisconsin. This will be closely watched across the country tonight. About 52,000 votes counted for Donald Trump there, and 33,000 votes counted for Kamala Harris. And again, that is a state where we will be probably watching for a while because they don't start counting the early vote until today. And so this could take some time. They've said to have patience. And I think I did hear a little inkling of some problems, with voting, polling sites today in the Milwaukee area. But I mean, there are always going to be small issues that crop up, but they can slow the process down.
Right.
Yeah.
That slow if polls are open later. Exactly.
For our Wisconsin viewers and Minnesota for that, give us what is unique about Wisconsin. I mean, it used to be red as could be, and now it's not. And at least from my understanding, the key metropolitan areas of Madison and Milwaukee seem to be the reason.
Well, that's exactly right. So
why they're not anymore.
Right, just like Minnesota, where the urban areas tend to go heavily Democratic, Wisconsin has a similar dynamic, where Milwaukee is heavily Democratic, and then the college town of Madison, where the state capital is Democratic as well. So Wisconsin is a swing state. It really depends on turnout across the state, but particularly in these very dense urban areas. In addition to being a swing state at the presidential level, incumbent Senator Tammy Baldwin is facing a tough challenge from Eric Hovde. So, that's a race that has generated a lot of excitement as well. And so there were a lot of ads in Wisconsin, both at the presidential level and for the U.S. Senate.
And some of that bleeding over here too, because we cover western Wisconsin, so we were seeing a lot of ads.
That's right, and a competitive House race as well.
Yeah.
So.
Is down ballot voting an issue this year, or is it safe to say in every presidential election that's something that needs to be noted?
Well, it matters in every presidential election, but what we're seeing across the country in recent elections is less split ticket voting than in the past. So sort of party loyalty has gone up, and people are more likely to, vote for the same candidates that they do at the bottom of the ticket that they do at the top of the ticket. And if anything, there may be some fall off where people just don't vote in lower level elections, but there's not as much split ticket voting as there used to be.
All right, let's get back to that presidential election. The Electoral College map, this is the one, as I said before, that we will be watching very closely throughout the night. This is what will determine who goes to the White House. 270 is what it takes to get there. The latest count right now is Donald Trump with 195 and Kamala Harris with 113. But as Catherine notes, if you look to the East Coast there, North Carolina with 16, Georgia with 16. Those are the two that we're watching very closely. Georgia likely to come in first in that race.
So let's talk about the path to the presidency real quick, Catherine. The swing states haven't been called, but polling shows, even though they're very tight races, that they might lean one way or the other. So as you look at the 195 and 113, what are you seeing in terms of like a path to the presidency for each of the candidates?
Well, yeah, of course, each of the candidates would really like to win Pennsylvania. For Harris, if she were to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that would get her to exactly 270. Now, there are other routes to 270 as well for Harris, which do not include Pennsylvania, but that would be really key. Trump can take the Sun Belt states plus one of the upper Midwest states.
And there is Pennsylvania right there. You mentioned how important they are with those 19 electoral votes. 22% of the votes estimated to have been tabulated at this point tonight. Again, very early on in Pennsylvania. They've been warning us all week long that it might take days, if not longer. But right now, Kamala Harris with 58%, Donald Trump with 42%.
All right, let's take a look at some of those swing states, some of the key swing states in the numbers that we have so far. Let's take a look at Georgia here. For instance, 70% of the vote now counted, and that's the number that they told us voted early. 70% of eligible voters they had predicted voted in the early voting process. Donald Trump leading with 53% of the vote so far.
Take a look at North Carolina again, that key swing state, North Carolina. 39% of the votes estimated to have been tabulated right now. Donald Trump winning with 50% to Kamala Harris's 48%.
And let's take a look at Michigan. 11% of the votes counted, still a very low number. Right now, Kamala Harris is leading with 54% of the vote. Biden did take the state in 2020.
All right, we take a look at these things and then we sort of dig into them a little bit. The presidential race is the one that all eyes are on. There are important things in Minnesota, and we will get to those as more results come in. But tim-walz and David has been with Tim tonight already, so they are kind of digging into some of these things. The presidential race is the one that you guys are going to take a look at now, and how Minnesota kind of breaks down maybe county by county in that race.
Exactly. We're finally starting to get in some granular numbers. I mean, finally. It's 24 after 8, right? Some of these numbers are coming in kind of fast, but still at a low amount. I mean, we're still talking statewide at under 1% of the vote coming in, so keep that in mind. But we do have a couple of counties here, David.
That's right.
Okay, first one is Douglas County. Just about 3%. So far, Donald Trump up 67% in that early voting. And then we also have, David, Douglas County, 67%. Not a surprise, right?
No, we're going to look at, I want to remind people that at the end of the night, 87 counties in Minnesota. Democrats, with the exception of Klobuchar, win about 12 counties, but they win generally the 12 most populous counties in the state, which is mostly going to be right around through here and then up in St. Louis County. And so what we will
see, the rest, you're going to see red.
It's all going to be red. It's going to look just like America. America is going to be mostly red if you look at it at the county level, but a few blue counties. But yes, we're looking at this point, still remember, hardly any results in. Look at, was it 0.6% in Ramsey County? Again, no surprises at this point in terms of what we're looking at.
So less than 1% so far in Ramsey County, but this is just kind of a snapshot of the vote total that's coming in so far. We'll get more throughout the night, but I want to reemphasize what David says. A lot of the voting power in Minnesota is in the metropolitan area because that's where the population density is.
Yeah, about 56% of the voting population, again, is right through here. Oops, right through here.
And the rest of the state will pop up red throughout the night. And we'll be here to show it to you as those vote totals come in. Guys?
All right, Tim, thank you so much. Let's take a look at the state of Texas. Now, this is, we showed you the electoral map on that, and then that did go to Donald Trump, but this is a very closely watched Senate race, U.S. Senate race in Texas. And this was supposed to have been a very tight race. It actually ends up pretty tight. 60% voting or reporting in right now. Ted Cruz, the incumbent Republican with 52%, the declared winner in the state of Texas. That was one that was being watched very closely as a possible flip for the Democrats in the U.S. Senate, but doesn't seem like it's going to happen that way.